Ever heard of a marathon runner sparking a revolution?
A
Yeah,
revolution.
get ready to deep dive into the thrilling world of women in sports, where we'll uncover how individual acts of defiance, like, you know, literally running a race, helped rewrite the rules for girls in every arena.
It's fascinating how a single photo, a moment frozen in time, right, can expose these deeply rooted societal norms and spot change that, I mean, it's incredible. It reverberates through generations.
Okay, so picture this. The 1967 Boston Marathon. A young woman, Kathrine Switzer, is in the race. But she's not just running. She's being physically confronted by an official trying to rip off her race number.
I've seen that photo. It's incredible.
It became an icon of the era. Why? Because back then, women weren't even allowed to officially enter the Boston Marathon.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. You're right. It wasn't just about the marathon. To truly grasp the magnitude of Catherine's act, we need to rewind to the landscape before Title IX, the landmark legislation of 1972. Imagine a world with incredibly limited opportunities for women in sports, where societal expectations often overshadowed raw talent and athletic ambition.
It's almost like trying to fathom a world without the WNBA or women's professional soccer, right?
Right.
Hard to believe those things were once considered radical. But even beyond the professional level, girls were battling for the chance to simply play, period.
Precisely. In 1950, there was this young girl, Kay Johnston, and she loved baseball so much that she disguised herself as a boy just to play Little League. It's amazing. Her determination speaks volumes, but the fact that she was banned when her gender was discovered really underscores the deeply ingrained barriers women faced back then.
It's incredible. It shows just how ingrained those biases were.
Right.
So back to 1967, Kathrine Switzer toes the line at the Boston Marathon, a race that, as we said, outright banned women. What compelled her to take on such a defiant act?
Well, Catherine's story, I think, is a testament to the power of individual conviction. She was a runner and she loved to push her limits and she firmly believed in her right to compete. So she strategically registered for the marathon using just her initials, KV Switzer, to circumvent the rules.
And that's where that iconic photo comes in, right? What
Eh.
exactly happened in those intense moments?
Well, as Catherine described it, she was running with her boyfriend, who was also her coach, and suddenly this race official, just furious that a woman had infiltrated the race, lunged at her, just like out of nowhere. The photo captures the boyfriend shoving the official aside as Catherine, laser-focused, continues running, just determined to finish what she started.
It's such a powerful image. You can practically feel the tension, a woman literally pushing past societal barriers. There's no wonder this photo became a symbol. But I'm curious, what was going through Catherine's mind in that moment, defying these expectations, and how did the world react to her defiant act?
Well, Catherine later said she wasn't necessarily trying to make a grand political statement or anything. She simply loved running. And she wanted to test her limits, see what she was capable of. But the media frenzy surrounding her run and the blatant sexism she encountered inadvertently thrust the issue of women in sports into the national spotlight.
It's like her defiance, captured in that single image, became a catalyst. Suddenly, people couldn't ignore the stark inequality in athletics.
Precisely. Catherine's story resonated far beyond the finish line of that marathon. Her courage paved the way for future changemakers and helped ignite a movement demanding equal opportunity in sports.
And speaking of changemakers, our next stop takes us from the open road to the baseball diamond. Get ready to meet Maria Pepe, a young girl who took on Little League and, in many ways, embodied the spirit of the burgeoning women's rights movement.
Maria's story, much like Catherine's, proves that sometimes monumental change starts with individuals seeking nothing more than the chance to play the game they love.
So we've got 12-year-old Maria Pepe, a pitcher. She's got this mean arm, just wanting to play baseball. What made her story such a big deal back then?
Yeah.
It seems like a no-brainer now, girls playing baseball, but it obviously wasn't back then.
Yeah, it's easy to forget looking back, just how radical challenging the status quo in youth sports seemed in the early 70s.
Right.
And in Maria's case, her talent was, ironically, what ignited the controversy.
Really?
She was so good that it threatened this long-held notion of Little League as a boys-only domain, you know what I mean?
Oh, interesting. So, like, she was almost too good.
Yeah, exactly. Her ability challenged the existing order.
So what were the arguments used to try and keep her off the field? I bet they haven't aged well.
You're right about that. They argued that girls' bones were too fragile for baseball, that they'd be constantly injured.
Oh, come on.
And get this, they even claimed boys needed their private space away from girls, on the field.
You're kidding.
It sounds absurd now, but these arguments resonated with some people back then. It
Wow.
just highlights how deep these biases ran.
It's amazing how deeply entrenched those beliefs were.
Hmm.
But thankfully, Maria and her family, they didn't back down right.
Yeah.
They had some powerful allies in their corner, didn't they?
They did indeed. The National Organization for Women, NOW, recognized that this wasn't just about Maria, it was about setting a legal precedent for girls in all sports. So they took on her case, fighting tirelessly for her right to play.
It's a powerful reminder of how these individual stories can connect to these larger movements. Maria, perhaps unknowingly, became a symbol of this fight for gender equality that was gaining momentum across the U.S.
Absolutely, yeah. Her courage to simply play the game she loved helped chip away at those outdated norms.
It's amazing how these stories of personal conviction can help drive change, on a societal level.
Speaking of which, let's switch gears from the baseball diamond to the world of professional tennis and the legendary Billie Jean King.
Okay.
You can't talk about women challenging the status quo in sports without mentioning her name, especially when we talk about the Battle of the Sexes match in 1973. That wasn't just a tennis match, it was a cultural phenomenon. Why did this event capture the world's attention in the way that it did? Well, the Battle of the Sexes transcended tennis, I think, and it became this global spectacle because it perfectly captured the changing social dynamics of the time. It became a platform for this larger conversation about gender roles and equality, using the world of sports as its stage.
Okay, so for those who maybe don't know, paint us a picture. Who was Billie Jean King up against, and what made this match so legendary?
Okay, so picture the early 1970s. The women's rights movement was gaining serious traction, challenging traditional norms, and then enters this highly publicized tennis match. You've got Billie Jean King, a young, outspoken advocate for women's equality, up against Bobby Riggs, a former Wimbledon champ, yes, but also a self-proclaimed chauvinist past his prime who embodied the very attitudes the women's movement was fighting against.
Oh, wow. Talk about a clash of ideologies. It sounds almost like a made-for-TV movie.
Right. It's the kind of drama that writes itself.
It does.
Riggs was famous, or infamous, for his sexist remarks. He claimed women belonged in the kitchen, not on the court, even boasting that he could beat any female player in the world.
Oh, wow.
His whole persona was this calculated mix of showmanship and, unfortunately, deeply held biases that were all too common back then.
And Billie Jean King initially wasn't interested in playing his game, right? She refused to engage in the spectacle at first.
You're right, she did. At first, she declined his challenge, seeing it for the publicity stunt it was. But then, Riggs challenged another top female player, Margaret Court, and he won. So Billie Jean, she kind of recognized then that staying silent spoke volumes too. This wasn't just a tennis match anymore. It was about defending the progress women had fought so hard for and challenging Riggs' blatant sexism, head on.
So the stage was set for this incredible showdown, this battle of ideologies. What was the atmosphere like leading up to the match?
Oh, the hype was electric. It was unlike anything the tennis world had ever seen. This match with all of its social and cultural weight was broadcast in prime time to millions worldwide.
Wow.
That alone speaks to how significant it had become, far beyond just a game.
It became a cultural moment. Everyone had an opinion, right? Were you rooting for Billie Jean?
Yeah.
I have to admit, I would have been glued to the TV.
It was definitely one of those moments where the world seemed to stop and watch. But beyond the hype, the match itself became this powerful symbol, right? It was about so much more than just who could hit a backhand better. It was about equality, respect, and the power of sports to be this catalyst for social change.
Okay, so the world is watching. Billie Jean King steps onto the court, carrying the weight of expectations, not just as an athlete, but as a symbol of something much larger. What happened? Give us the play-by-play.
Well, the match itself was captivating, a display of skill and determination, but it was Billie Jean's unwavering focus that was truly remarkable. She wasn't just playing against Bobby Riggs, she was dismantling a mindset and outdated ideology that sought to, relegate women to the sidelines, and she did it with grace and power, defeating Riggs in straight sets.
Wow, it must have felt like a collective victory for so many people watching around the world. Did the impact of Billie Jean's win translate beyond the tennis court? Did it actually shift perspectives?
Absolutely. The Battle of the Sexes wasn't just a tennis match, it was a cultural earthquake. It challenged traditional notions of gender roles, sparked conversations in living rooms and workplaces, and, most importantly, emboldened a generation to demand equality both on and off the court. It demonstrated the power of sports to ignite social change and prove that visibility and advocacy could chip away at deeply entrenched societal beliefs.
So we've talked about Katrin Switzer defying the odds at the Boston Marathon, Maria Pepe fighting for her right to play Little League, and Billie Jean King using the world stage to challenge gender norms. These are incredible stories of individual courage, but they also lead up to a pivotal moment in 1972 that would forever alter the landscape of women's sports. The passage of Title IX. What exactly did these 37 words do?
Title IX itself is surprisingly concise, but its impact has been monumental, especially for women in sports. While the legislation itself focuses broadly on equal opportunity in education, stating that no person in the United States shall be discriminated against based on sex in any education program receiving federal financial assistance, its application extends far beyond the classroom.
So how did this seemingly general law revolutionize women's sports specifically?
That's where the courts come in. While Title IX doesn't explicitly mention sports, the courts have interpreted it to mean that schools and colleges receiving federal funding must provide equal athletic opportunities for men and women. This doesn't mean identical sports or programs, but rather equitable opportunities for participation, scholarships, and resources.
So if a university has, say, a 55% female student body, their athletic programs should aim for roughly 55% female athlete participation. That's what proportionality means in terms of Title IX.
Exactly. It's about leveling the playing field, ensuring that women have a fair shot at pursuing their athletic dreams at all levels of education.
That makes sense. Equal opportunity should mean equal representation. So 50 years later, what's the legacy of Title IX? Has it achieved what it set out to do?
The impact of Title IX has been undeniable. Just look at the numbers. In 1972, fewer than 300,000 girls participated in high school sports. Today, that number has skyrocketed to over 3 million. That's a phenomenal increase, a testament to the power of this legislation.
That's incredible growth. It really highlights the transformative impact of Title IX. But it hasn't been without its challenges, right?
You're right. While Title IX was designed to create more equitable opportunities, it has also led to some unintended consequences, particularly at the collegiate level. As women's sports programs expanded to comply with Title IX, some men's programs, particularly those considered non-revenue generating like wrestling or swimming, faced budget cuts, or in some cases were even discontinued. This sparked legal battles and ignited debate about how to balance the goals of equality with the financial realities of collegiate athletics. It's an ongoing conversation with passionate voices on all sides.
And it's not just about budgets, is it? The fight for equality in women's sports is an ever-evolving conversation. The inclusion of transgender athletes, for example, has sparked really complex discussions about how to ensure fairness and uphold the rights of all athletes. It's a testament to how far we've come that we're now grappling with these nuanced questions. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from those pioneers like Katrin Switzer, Maria Pepe, and Billie Jean King, who courageously challenged the status quo, to the transformative yet complex legacy of Title IX. It's clear that the fight for equality in women's sports is far from over.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. But as we've seen, individual stories have the power to ignite movements, legislation can reshape the landscape, and ongoing dialogue is essential to navigate the complexities. The journey towards true equality requires constant vigilance, adaptation, and a willingness to challenge outdated norms.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up this deep dive into the captivating world of women in sports. How will this ongoing story unfold? What new chapters will be written, and what will it take to ensure that the playing field continues to become more level, more inclusive for all athletes, regardless of gender? It's a question worth pondering, a conversation worth continuing. And as we've learned today, sometimes the most powerful stories of change start with a single voice, a single act of courage, a single step towards a more equitable future.